I've accidentally spent my whole life making sure everyone around me was comfortable, only to realise I never felt comfortable the whole time. Hi, I'm Laura and I am ADHDAF. And since I found that out at the age of 38, I've spent the last 3 years talking about ADHD, which led to creating an online peer support community alongside this podcast, which led to inspiring and informing the creation of a charity called ADHDAF to connect and empower ADHD adults of marginalised genders in Scotland, England and Wales. Although the work of this podcast inspired the creation of the charity and will fundraise and promote the events of the charity, they are two entirely separate entities. This episode, in theory, is going to be a monthly special in which I introduce the topic that we'll be focusing on for the charity in-person peer support groups, and I'll be exploring that topic with some of the people behind the charity. Our Chazza. I just want to start with a trigger warning. This episode will contain some triggering topics. Please have a read of the description before listening on. If you are struggling, please know that you are not alone. There is also a link in the show notes to some suggested resources for support. So if you need help, do reach out. If you've listened to this podcast before, then you will likely know that my mother passed away at the end of January. And since that point, though I have done a few episodes, I haven't actually interviewed anyone that I'm not close to. And there is good reason for that. There are a lot of amazing guests, and some of whom are very well known in the public eye, a few celebrities in there on the podcast, but they didn't come knocking at the door. I chased them down, some of whom I chased and emailed for literally about a year. It really was a lot of work. I'm sure you've all heard of Spoon's theory. It's to do with our energy levels, what we have the capacity for. And I really don't have the capacity to chase guests right now. Having said that, I do have multiple bulging inboxes full of people that want to be on the podcast, though I'm sure their services or the book that they want to sell might be useful. I'm more than a little bit tired of people exploiting this platform. And I do understand that that is how podcasts work. But this isn't your standard podcast, not by a mile. Because I've been burnt before. The couple of people I've not begged on are the ones that I was let down by because they weren't really in it. This isn't a podcast, it's a movement that has been able to keep momentum and launch a charity due to the support of the community. So it really is family vibes back here. To have people want to use this platform to make money when they've already got a team, some with sponsors, etc., and I literally don't have any of those things, and it is just me really working my absolute socks off to get the charity up and running. It is the stuff of justice sensitivity nightmares, never mind the RSD. And I'm sure you'll notice that aside from the plugs of all things ADHDAF, the community and the Emporium both raise funds for the charity. There is absolutely no external advertisement on this podcast. And I do it not because I'm a martyr with low self-worth, though both of those things are an absolute given, but because I have never seen this as a podcast. I call it pirate radio, but what it really is activism in action. I haven't come here to make money. I've come here to raise ADHD awareness and hell and have a fair few laughs along the way. So at this point, when I really don't have the spoons to chase strangers, I also recognise that I'm in an even more vulnerable position than normal in my grief. So I really don't have the spoons to mask, as I would need to host an interview with a stranger. Masking is not just the topic of today's conversation. As I said, it is the topic of the ADHDAF peer support groups this month in Edinburgh, Aberdeen and Manchester. And then in London and Birmingham, I'll be delivering ADHD seminars in the form of a game of bingo on the 1st and 3rd of July. For this very relaxed, informal conversation, much like those that we have at the ADHD Charity in-person peer support groups, I am joined by ADHDAF Plus Treasurer Kim and London Support Group co-facilitators Ruth and Tracy. It isn't studio quality, because it's not recorded in a studio. It's a chinwag over Zoom that we hope you take as much away from about ADHD masking as we did. And having ranted on about how I don't sell people's books, I do make the odd exception when I really believe in them, like this incredible one. And I wanted to start off by reading this quote, which is from a brilliant book called You Are Not Your ADHD by Lou O'Connell, MBE. I've accidentally spent my whole life making sure everyone around me was comfortable, only to realise I never felt comfortable the whole time. Hard relate, ladies? I'm going to quote Lou again, because she's so very wise. ADHD in women can go unseen for many years due to the long list of expectations society puts on women, such as believing that all women should know how to proficiently juggle managing themselves and their career alongside a home and a family. Whilst this can be a struggle for any woman, women with ADHD will often mask symptoms and problems in an attempt to conform to these expectations. Many women with ADHD internalise feelings of shame and guilt due to their struggles. They think, well, everyone else can do it, so why can't I? This has a detrimental effect on their self-worth and self-esteem. I have yet to meet a woman diagnosed later in life who hasn't felt like she was failing as an adult, woman, mother, sister, daughter, etc., despite outward success in these areas. That definitely spoke to me. I think it's really interesting as women and all people who menstruate, we're already masters of masking because we have to mask our pain, our physical pain, once a month to get the job done. And I think that that in itself really sets us up for this idea of hiding what's really happening to us. If we have to hide how we physically feel, then it's second nature to hide how we feel emotionally. Due to multi-hormone sensitivity theory, our ADHD symptoms can change and fluctuate and be exacerbated by our hormones. So those hormone fluctuations, so many of us also experiencing PMDD. I know for me, somebody who is very much negatively impacted by the emotional side of ADHD, that's one of the ways in which I very much mask. And I don't always succeed because of those eruptions. How I actually feel is something that I obviously carry, but know in so many situations that that is deemed inappropriate or unacceptable for the surroundings or present company or by society. Nobody likes an angry woman, etc. I'm already coming in knowing that how I feel or what I think is either incorrect or inappropriate. And so that's, I would say, my number one place that I mask. What parts of you have you hidden or masked to fit in?
I think probably my ADHD got quite bad after I had my first child, but obviously had absolutely no idea. And then when I had my second child, not long after that, I had a bit of an addiction issue, which, as I now realise, is obviously a common comorbidity of ADHD. A lot of that was to mask. It was to mask me struggling because I couldn't do it, all the things. My husband, he was out a lot.
Yeah.
And so I was just on my own a lot of the time and having to do everything and trying to mask self-medicating, shall we say.
That's really interesting because there's another layer to that, isn't it? It's not necessarily what you're externalizing, but you're internally masking from yourself, hiding your pain, hiding your struggles, numbing yourself with substances.
Yeah, that whole unmasking was one thing, and it was made a lot easier once I understood the ADHD, because then it was like, oh, I'm not broken. I'm not just an addict. Actually, there's a reason why I'm using that thing, and it's because of this thing.
An addiction is so often trying to survive, trying to get through. Did you get diagnosed with postnatal depression, or you just soldiered on? Yeah. I've spoken to a lot of people that have said those first couple of years of their child's life just went through in a bit of a haze, well, even more than I would imagine it would do anyway, with no bloody sleep and all the rest of it, but like particularly felt like they'd really missed out because of that misdiagnosis and mistreatment.
I do really think, and this is a shout out to the Princess of Wales, if she's listening.
Of course she is. She's on next.
She told me while we were having lunch yesterday that she listens all the time.
Exactly. But no, she's doing all this thing about, the early years and how important the early years are and supporting women that have young children. And there's I haven't heard her mention neurodivergency at all in any of that. And how much of that would be, a big impact.
I mean, we're about to go off on a completely different tangent, and I love a side quest. So I'm gonna start this, and I'm gonna try and rein it straight back in as well. Just to mention, yesterday we had a really good session with Kirsty in the community who was talking about hormones, and we kind of all came to the same sort of conclusion. Like, it's bad enough when we're being told that we're jumping on a bandwagon for wanting to be assessed for ADHD. It's quite another when women are being gaslit and dismissed and being told they're jumping on a bandwagon for wanting hormonal support. Like, that's in our life trajectory. Short of premature loss of life, which unfortunately, as we know, is statistically something that we can be. But if we live that long, we are all going to go through the change. So how it can be like, oh, no, blood test, off you pop. No, this is just a trendy thing. People all want hormones. No, people need support, and it's going to happen in our lifetimes. Anyway, I'm going to rein that right in there and get back to unmasking. Tracy, what parts of yourself have you hidden or masked to fit in?
Same, I've masked all my life. I've always felt different, always felt like that I was on the outside of groups, trying to wear clothes like other people to fit in, even though I didn't feel comfortable wearing those clothes, or trying to go to the same places thinking that they're all having a good time, so I should be having a good time, and just never really sort of feeling like I belonged anywhere. Obviously masked my sexuality through my whole life. Even for myself, I always felt like I was winging it with the kids. I always felt like everybody else around me knows what they're supposed to be doing, and I just never felt like I was good enough, doing a good enough job. But always on the outside, everyone seems to think that I'm doing great.
That's exactly what our Lou was saying, wasn't it? I have yet to meet a woman diagnosed later in life who hasn't felt like she was failing. I've often been asked questions like, well, how do you know if you're masking? And what is unmasking? And how do I unmask? And my personal feeling is that quite often people can tie themselves in knots with it. There's no specifications. There's no detailed description of what it is and how to get out of it. What you're talking about is performing in a certain way to fit in. So it can be anything from over-preparing, people-pleasing, mimicking others to fit in, suppressing emotions and hiding struggles. The swan on the top of the water, like desperately battling underneath that nobody can see. It's a bit like me, my house is quite tidy. And then you open the cupboard.
Yeah.
Doom cupboards and doom piles everywhere. Yeah.
And that is a chaos that no one ever needs to see. That is the inside of my brain.
But I would argue it can be seen that you're doing that to mask because you don't want other people to see it. But equally, it can be for your own peace of mind that you can look around and be okay with it. That's why it's so hard to know, when are you masking, when are you not? And also that it's okay to mask in certain situations. That's the biggest one.
Oh, 100%. 100%. So it's the specifications that are not there, the nuances of it all. I'll give another example. It would not, as life stands at this moment in time, let's not say never ever, but it would not be appropriate for me to be my fully unmasked, cackling self in a library. So, I should unmask in a library. No, I shouldn't, because that is not the space for it. And there is reason for that, is that actually, if I sat here flicking a pen or doing whatever, that could be distracting to other people that have gone to this place of quiet. And that is why I do not frequent libraries. But the point is, you see what I'm saying? You can't, this is, I think, where people who are very detail focused can really tie themselves in knots, because they want the full description, they want the full answer. Am I masking? Am I unmasking? It's just really about asking yourself what feels comfortable, what feels uncomfortable, what feels authentic, what doesn't. And at the end of the day, knowing that sometimes you are going to have to wear a mask, or I prefer the term, donning different hats.
It's not unusual for neurotypical people to do it as well. So, as you say, read a room, wear clothes, know that you need a mask at certain points. And even down to the clothes point, there are sadly unfortunate situations where you can't be rocking up in your bikini, let's say for argument's sake, when you're in a corporate environment. It does exist, but we have just managed to master it way more than we realise for not just those social conforming places, but every situation that we attend.
At a detrimental impact to our self-worth, our self-esteem, and even our identity.
When we do it, it's so ingrained in us that we don't even know we're doing it, and we don't even know that we're feeling uncomfortable until all of a sudden we go, oh, something's not right here. I think neurotypicals, they do it on purpose. Like, they know when they need to do certain things and they don't feel uncomfortable about it.
Well, a lot of them got the handbook, right? That elusive handbook. They seem to have got them rules.
Yeah, they got their handbook that I didn't get. You know, when people say, oh, trust your gut, trust your instincts. And I never believed that I should do that, because I thought, well, everybody else does it this way, so I've just got to do it the same as everybody else. I never trusted what my instincts were saying to me. And now it's me learning to actually trust those and trust what I'm saying inside and what my instincts are all saying to me, and learning to act on those rather than what everybody else around me is trying to say.
Unmasking is like a radical act of self-trust, which is incredibly hard for people that have heard 20,000 more negative things by the age of 10. Like you've said, addiction, conflict, family issues, anything, all of these different traits that can be so common for people with ADHD, particularly unidentified and unmanaged ADHD. It's very, very hard to trust ourselves. So one of the questions that we can ask ourselves to help ourselves unmask is, what behaviours do I do now that don't feel like me? For me at the moment, obviously I've always got to get the tiny violins out, but having just lost my mum, I don't have the same bandwidth that I had a year ago. So I'm having to spend my spoons slightly more wisely, or trying to anyway. And what it's really highlighted for me is how exhausting I find all of the admin behind the scenes, because there is a lot of admin, and I ain't ever had an admin job. Well, I had one for 2 weeks. Like, this really isn't my skill set. I'm a speaker, I'm a creative, I'm a people person, and I've spent about a year behind a screen, and it's really having a detrimental effect on my mental health, on my energy levels, on everything. And I suddenly realized that I'm in this really ridiculous, ironic to the point of a sick joke position, where in order to be this ADHD advocate, I often have to pretend I don't have it. That is the biggest joke of all time. It would be wise for me at this point now, I don't like CEO. I'm going to make up a new phrase, like really shit daydreams. There's going to be one for CEO. I should be on LinkedIn. A couple of years ago, somebody said to me, oh, you don't need to be on that. That's for professionals, which obviously hit something really deep in me, that now I can't be on LinkedIn. It doesn't matter how many times somebody says to me, Laura, it's just Facebook for work. All you do is work. You've got loads of things to share. Just put it up there. I get on there and I'm just like, I can't be here. And they're all speaking in corporate terms, and it makes me want to burn the whole thing down. I started to write something for LinkedIn about unmasking, and I realized that I used the term professional. And then I was just like, this is the most ironic piece of writing of all time, because I would write totes profesh, because because I make myself laugh as I go. I don't want to be professional in that sense. But it's that imposter syndrome. It's the negative, the shitty committee in our brain saying, you don't belong here. You don't belong here. They're doing it right. You're going to do it wrong. Don't trust yourself. Ruth, what are the behaviours that you do now that don't feel like you? Can you identify some places or ways that you are still masking? Because we can't unlearn this lifetime behaviour overnight.
It's mainly around people that I haven't come out to in terms of ADHD, in-laws.
Yeah.
This is all my own assumptions, because I have not had any conversation with them about ADHD. They have no idea that I've been on this podcast more than once. They don't even probably know this exists. They don't know I volunteer with the charity, because all of those things would require me to have a conversation about ADHD. If you don't feel safe with people, then you don't have to tell them.
So what we're saying is we are eradicating the shame from masking, because there are many situations where it can actually be about, keeping us safe mentally, emotionally, for our well-being. Tracy, what about you? You've obviously been on a huge safari of self-discovery and changed everything, but what behaviours do you still do now that don't feel like authentic to you?
Sometimes when I'm around people from my previous life, I feel like I still try and act like the person that I used to be,
Yes.
Dress the same way that I have always dressed, not feel so comfortable in how I act and speak and things around people that I used to know or still know, but
from a different lifetime.
Part of my old life.
Kim, how about you? Because you are like somewhat of a guru in the well-being world, and the most liked episode of ADHDAF ever is our chinwag. So how are you still masking? Because it's hard to believe that you would, but go on, tell us.
But I've become very much aware of how much I stim in physical conversations, how much I am listening but not listening. I might have engaged with somebody in a social environment. In my brain has gone, this person's as dull as ditch water, and I can hear something way more exciting over there. So I'm just nod. And it's a complete mask because I have no idea what they're saying. And all I'm doing is hearing the other conversation. I am at my best when I don't have anybody that has any long-term history. And it's not that I've got a history to hide. I've got quite a lot of history to hide, but it's the history of people who knew me without having my new awareness. I know it's not a new label, and it's not a label for label's sake, as the world will tell me. It's a label that I have embraced that enables me to go, actually, when I find the right people that I want to be around, I can be me. I don't need to have this mask up. I don't need to apologize. I don't need to say, sorry, can you say that again? Because people get it when I'm with the right people. It only takes me to share with one person my recent diagnosis, or I say recent, it's now getting on for 3-4 years, to give me any comment of anything. Oh, we've all got it. You've got it. It's obvious. Then the mask goes right back up. You'll never hear me talk about it again.
You can almost feel the mask going up now. It's like the shackles on your back go up. It's like everything just kind of like, right, it's gone.
Not to shout out our other activities, but the self-care club the other day, when we were talking about self-forgiveness and the inner critic and stuff, I've literally just forgotten my point. Literally, what was it?
No, I love it. It's really on brand, and it's always comedy timing.
It is on brand.
That's the thing, though, isn't it? I think on top of like the 20,000 negative things, as we've already said, as women and people of marginalised genders, there are societal expectations on us to be quiet, be good. Even things like how we sit. Like as children, we would sit cross-legged or with your legs wide open like you're doing the bloody splits or something. And it'd be like, oh, no, you mustn't do that. You have to sit with your legs closed. And now, really, I don't even think about it. It's just that's how you must sit, for example.
We've been taught to close up physically through the front line of our body, whether that's legs or upper body. So we end up closing and we end up holding and we end up curling inwards. So we're always in a protective mode anyway. It's an old patriarchal close your legs. You don't want to be seen as a floozy. Don't stick your boobs out. You don't want to be this. You don't want to be that. Yeah. So we are constantly...
And shrink. Make yourself smaller.
Yeah. And even now you can hear people saying, look at her with all her, all her boobs out. Look at her. And it's like, yeah, let her be. She is allowed to be.
Exactly. I have to say, especially when we first discover that we have ADHD, I've said many times about the relief. You've got the relief of finally having the answers, but there is an element of grief. And I think particularly when you realise not just that you've hidden your true self from the people in your life, but even from yourself, there is such grief there. I spoke on ADHD or Just a Bit Weird interview that I was on. That's a brilliant podcast. I masked so much from my family in particular because of the expectations. I'm mixed race, my mother's Caribbean, like it, you know, there are very specific cultural expectations placed on my shoulders. I knew I had to behave certain ways to be deemed acceptable. When I knew that I wasn't, I was the most unacceptable person in their eyes, actually, truthfully, really. Not me being down on myself, really. The expectations on my shoulders, I was the opposite of that. So I had to pretend that I was. There is such tragedy in that. It's just very sad that it meant that I didn't have authentic relationships with them, and it robbed me of, you know, because it's a hard thing to keep up, pretending to be somebody else. So it's quite draining and it's exhausting, and you come away feeling worse. So then I would see them less and less, or be in touch less and less. The only real saving grace is that I did get my diagnosis and step out and do all of this ADHDAF business in my mum's lifetime, because had it have been 3 more years, then she would literally never have known me or understood those actions that did keep her up at night, you know?
It's really hard, not just what you missed out on, but also when you then come to that realization of going, well, I don't even know who I am. Like, literally.
My grief has been about lost time and conversations that I had, and I didn't show up as myself as a result of the diagnosis, where I can see clearly now what was happening as time goes on. And it's quite difficult to let go of some of those are traumas, etc., etc. But as time goes on, it's become clearer. And is that because I'm older? Is that because I've got this diagnosis? I don't know, but I have just got braver and stronger.
I've definitely done the same. I've started actually sort of saying, oh, I don't think I've processed that, or I don't think I've heard that. Going back to what Ruth said about not telling people, how difficult it is when people constantly tell you, oh, but everybody's got it. Before I would have gone, oh, yeah, and just pretended that I agreed with whatever they've said. I'm getting better at actually saying, well, no, actually, we're well underdiagnosed, and it's just that, you know, people are actually being able to talk about it now. I mean, I've been diagnosed 3 years now, and the shame around that bit has been horrible. It's been so much easier coming out as gay than coming out as ADHD, and like having to hide the fact that you're ADHD, and I think I'm autistic as well. So it's sort of, you've got the two sides of that coin that are just make it so difficult. And I've had to be braver. I sometimes feel that that's masking, because I'm not brave, I'm not strong, and I don't.
Well, we're going to take off the mask and talk about hats. You're putting on a different hat for that occasion. Like, it's really funny because, you know, as I've said, I kept myself out of the corporate world because I knew I didn't fit. And because I am so shit at masking, apart from that parent or other people's parent situations, I haven't really masked until I realised, you know, if the idea is that masking is sitting up straight, sitting still, saying the right words, listening intently, I'll go the other way and be completely outrageous. Because I know I can't hold it, whatever all of this, what am I supposed to do with all of this is, I just go, rah, let it all out, take up all of the space, be loud, be whatever, and do it that way. And actually go, how much of that?
But how much of that?
Exactly.
How much of that?
How much of that is authentic in that moment? Or are you hiding behind that persona?
The assumption when you hear that is back to that whole, you know, if you're being professional in a professional world, whatever. So the people that don't have to mask are people like creatives who never have to work in the office and blah, blah, blah. But obviously, as we've said, that's also rubbish, because they could be masking in the other direction and still masking. It's all about the feeling inside. How do you feel in that moment?
Yeah, or it's limiting your exposure to the things that cost you spoons, because as we've said, it's exhausting to keep up an act, to have to behave a certain way, to be hypervigilant, watching your surroundings in a place that you don't feel comfortable.
It's just about giving yourself some grace and just trying to recognize the feeling. That's it. If you can even start recognize the feeling of when it genuinely is discordant, if that's a word in your head. I like that word. But, you know, when that's kind of is feeling really uncomfortable and just noticing it.
Yeah, 100%. It's that self-inventory time and again, looking into feeling. You know, there are certain situations I come away feeling exhausted, and there are other situations that I come away feeling high, completely exuberant. There's one more thing that I wanted to say. I feel like I'm preaching or something. This is just my opinion. This is just my opinion based on my lived experience. I'm not saying I'm right. This is my feeling, is that if we were all to completely unmask, like, where is the responsibility to others? Example, I'm a hugger. Not everyone is. And I'm incredibly enthusiastic. If I'm excited to see you, I'm going to run up to you and probably even try and pick you up, depending on how ridiculous I'm feeling that day. But that is not okay. Are you a hugger? Am I okay to touch you? And I do it still. There are situations where I walk up and I go, hi, and launch at somebody. And then I immediately go, oh, I'm really sorry. I should have checked. That's my impulsivity. But that doesn't because I'm impulsive, because I'm affectionate, enthusiastic, that doesn't give me the right to overstep somebody else's boundaries. And I might still do it because of my presentation of neurodivergence, but I would still have to take accountability for that and say, sorry, that's not okay. I didn't mean to do that. And I would make every effort not to do that. So if we all unmasked in the library and were singing and tapping and speaking and laughing, and if everyone was running around hugging everybody who didn't want to be hugged, that's not fair on them. So in finding our own boundaries and figuring out where we feel comfortable, trying to communicate them if it's safe to, or at least leaning into the spaces that don't cost us all of the frigging spoons, we also have to be respectful that other people's is going to look completely different to ours, and be respectful of others' boundaries. And that's it, really. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I didn't mean to ramble that long, but,
It is what you're saying. It's about learning to put ourselves in the places and the positions and with the people that make us feel comfortable. If we're constantly masking, if we're constantly feeling like we have to put on that act, put on that mask, then don't put yourselves in that position. If you're surrounded by friends, family that aren't kind, aren't being nice, you feel like you're always hiding yourself from them. You don't have to put yourself in a position where you're with them for too long.
Or limit your exposure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just, we do have to take some responsibility for ourselves.
Yes.
Just making sure that we're responsible for our own actions and making sure that we then feel comfortable about it.
Okay, I was just going to say then, I think what we're saying here is there are social norms by which everybody has to adhere to. So rocking up, hugging people, kissing people. There's going to be social acceptances that everybody has, whether you're neurodivergent, neurotypical, whatever. As Tracy says, we need to be away from them. We don't need to be in them. I think some of those social situations we know we can absolutely be, to coin or to quote your phrase, too much, Laura. Anyway, we know that there are places where we can show up and be that too much. I'm at the point of, I know where a lot of my masks show up. I now understand them. I recognize them. I've become more present. I'm doing it. I understand what it means now. No longer do I have to say, oh, I'm a great chameleon. I can put me up with the upper class, lower class, middle class, etc., academics. But I understand that a lot of that was all about that masking. But I'd still happily be in those people's company, but perhaps wouldn't be quite that person I was before. And that would mean I wouldn't be talking like you. I wouldn't be dressing like you. I wouldn't be trying to be like you. I wouldn't, and all of those things, I'd now start showing up more like me.
Yeah.
And when people go, you're a bit different, or, oh, Kim, you didn't used to be like this. It's like, actually, this is me. This is me.
And do you know what's been like ringing in my ears, apart from the tinnitus, is that in order. So what you said, Trace, was like, you spend more times in the places that you are comfortable, but in order to make those connections and find those spaces, you would need to unmask and authentically show up as yourself to be able to attract those people. And this is the perfect hook. And we hope that you will come along to the ADHDAF support groups. It is a safe space to unmask. You will not be judged. And as we know through the community, which is the work that has inspired the creation of the charity, being around literally like-minded people that respect that we're all going to be a bit different. We're all coming from a good place. We're all showing up to connect as a community. That is exactly what these support groups are all about in real life. Enormous thanks to Tracy, Ruth and Kim, and of course, the Duchess of Wales for all of her support. Hope you enjoyed the episode, hun. So now we're attempting to swap the rigidity of masking and maybe perhaps try and see it instead as putting on different hats, some of which necessary for the environment. Do you find that analogy helpful? You know I love a hat. In this episode, we touched on hormones and the impact that they can have on ADHD, that multi-hormone sensitivity theory. And if you'd like to learn more about that, you can listen to the episode with the incredible Dr. Nigat Arif, which is quite a few episodes back. But if you type in Dr. Nigat, you'll find the episode on hormones, perimenopause, really exploring the impact of those hormones on our ADHD. Now, many neurodivergent people struggle to identify their emotions, which is something we talked a great deal about in this episode. That can be due to alexithymia. To learn more about this, you can listen to the episode with Katie Osaurus called ADHD, Sex, Dungeons and Dragons. If you've not already heard the previous 2 episodes about burnout and teamwork, have a listen, because I've had loads of amazing feedback. And alongside all of the information, validation, both share some very special events, the Big ADHD Fundraiser and the Blackpool Style Assembly, both raising funds for amazing charities, including ours. But before we get to either of those, there is, of course, July's free ADHD support groups on unmasking and ADHD bingo seminars. Both are free of charge and no ADHD diagnosis necessary, because self-diagnosis is valid. And in a system so broken that we currently have over 500,000 people in the UK on waiting lists, some of whom could be waiting up to a decade for life-changing and what can be, as was my case, life-saving ADHD assessment, diagnosis and treatment. Self-diagnosis has to be valid. People need support. You can read more about that, gain clarification on what we mean by marginalised genders, who our support groups are for, and find out the charity's reflection on the NHS England ADHD Task Force first report in the brand new blog, which is available on ADHDAFPLUS.org.uk or by clicking the link in the blurb of this episode. If you can't join us at any of the unmasking support groups of July, I invite you to explore the topic with 2 of the questions asked in this episode. What parts of you have you hidden or masked to fit in? And what would it or does it mean to drop the mask and let them be seen? If you're listening on Spotify or another platform that allows you to comment, you can let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear. Or if not, you can drop it on a post at ADHDAF Podcast on Insta. As we said, discovering your neurodivergence later in life brings a lot of relief. And I'm 3 years down the road and still figuring it out. If you are coming to the bingo seminars next week in Birmingham and London, and you have been to one of my ADHD bingo shows, one of the podcast tours before, they're slightly different. It's still a game of bingo. There will still be prizes. I need to find my ladle, but they won't have the karaoke and cabaret element of them because they are not shows, they are seminars, but they will still be ADHD awareness raising. They will still be fun. You can still win a prize. And they're totally free of charge, and you can connect with like-minded locals. And I hope that those of you learning about and sharing your experiences of unmasking and hopefully feeling able to do exactly that in Edinburgh on the 1st of July, Aberdeen 2nd and Manchester 9th, all have a great time connecting with like-minded locals. I can't wait to get to all of the peer support groups, and there are more coming up next month. If ADHDAF Plus Charity hasn't yet created a support group in your local area, you can apply to start your own via the link in the episode show notes. And you can also apply to become an ambassador. I would love you to, or volunteer your time. Anywhere you can lend us a hand, we would be so incredibly grateful. Whatever you are going through, if you need help, there's a list of suggested resources for support in the show notes. And you are never alone. We may all be different flavours of this ADHD ice cream with a variety of co-occurring sprinkles on top, but we are all on this safari together. I'm so grateful that we are. And I doff my many hats to you all. Thank you so much for listening. Le Prenome!